Hello guys and girls, how's it going? Screezel here and I hope you're all well, and just a quick video today, well quickish. So there's going to be a change to weapons performance, well shell performance, and this is a change that's kind of needed. We're going to get improved calculations for shells in the future. They're changing it to be a bit more simple as well. We're going to be using two different formulas, the DeMarr formula and the Lanz-Odermatt formulas. Now, the DeMarr formula was sort of started in around about 1880, I think, 1880, 1890, predominantly for naval combat. It was sort of worked out for naval combat mainly, and then of course it's evolved into other things because tanks became a thing, and tank guns and anti-tank guns and artillery and all of this kind of stuff became things. So it's been used in that respect. Now the APC, APC-BC and APC-BC rounds sort of be using the DeMarr formula, whereas the fin stabilized rounds and sort of the APDS and APFDS will still be worked. Will still be worked on the Lanz-Odermatt formula. Now the Lanz-Odermatt formula is very, very complicated. As you can see, we have here. Now, with this, it's very hard to work it out in-game because we don't have all the information. If we just look quickly, let's just go to Japan, tanks, blah blah blah, doopy-doopy-doo, would help if I actually turn that off, there we go. And if we just go to the Type 74, modifications, and then the M735 round. Now, with that, we have the caliber, we have the muzzle velocity, we have the projectile mass, but we don't have the rest of the details for the shell itself, and that's what we need for the formula to get it correct and get correct penetration values. Now, this makes it quite hard for things like APFDS because, you know, the shell is actually a lot thinner than the gun. So for instance, with a sort of, it's like when you're using the 105mm gun, the shell is going to be much smaller, and it's going to be sort of, you know, only 24mm in diameter, whereas, you know, it's coming out of a 105mm gun, so it should be 104mm in diameter. And so, you know, there's lots of things to work out. So let's say this was all of the information that we had on the shell. Everything's in there. We go to calculate, and boop, there we go. The performance sort of length, so perforation results, is around about 670mm. So then you can go to the game and go, okay, so it's meant to do that, so it should do that, and that's how it should work. And that's what the devs are working off, so it's going to make it a little bit quicker for the development team to work out new weapon systems, because they're going to be working off a set rule set. Now the dev post itself, I'll put a link below in the comments to read through it, because there is a lot of information here and there's a lot of mathematical stuff. They've done it quite simply just to make it a bit easier for people, but the big thing is for APC-BC, we've got a few things like the chart and stuff like that, where we can see information about the slope angles and stuff like that, and how that will affect the performance of the rounds. But we also have the ability to calculate. So no, that's not it. Sorry, I've got a few things that up at the moment. There we go, that's what I wanted. So this basically lets us calculate APC-BC. Now again, this link is in the dev post, so it's nice and easy to find. But what we can do with this is we can use it to calculate our round. So let's just make that smaller. We'll try that again. Capture. Sorry, we just got to get wrong one. We'll get there eventually. There we go. That's what we want. So let's get this up on the screen. So what this does is it lets us calculate some of the shells a little bit quicker and easier. So for instance, let us look at the hoe reproduction. So the hoe reproduction is a very big gun, and it has a very big shell on it. So the Type 2 APHE, oh wait, that's APHE actually, that's not what we want. We don't want APCBR, because there are some slight differences. Now it gets very complicated with the shells, shell types, because there's a lot of difference with how some shells work. We're just going to make this easy and just go to Germany. So bugger that, we'll go to Germany. So let us look at the Panther 2. So if we look at the Panther 2 modifications, we'll go to the Panzergranate 3943. So what we can do is we can go to the formula. So it's an 88mm. The weight of it is 10 kilograms. It's going at 1,000 meters per second, and the weight of the explosive mass. Now this is important to know because the explosive mass is important. So the explosive mass is 64 grams. So we'll change that from 65 to 64. Now remember, with this part here, it's 0.64, so that's 64 grams. So now we can calculate. There we go. So 176 millimeters of penetration, whereas currently it's got a lot more. Now this is sort of the base of how much it's going to penetrate. So with this new system, we are, by the looks of it, we're going to lose penetration. We're going to lose a lot of penetration on a lot of shells, the APCBR shells, and that's going to really affect some nations. But another thing it's going to do is make some vehicles stronger. Frontally, these tanks are going to be very strong. It means that you're going to no longer have some weak spots, and it's really going to help you be a bit more effective, which is fantastic. Things like the Tiger 2 are going to be very, very strong. Some of the Russian shells, for instance, are going to be have a very hard time getting through some of this armour. Now, of course, the front of the tank is still going to be a bit of a weak spot, especially for the 2P. Once we get to the 2H, yep, 2H, it's going to be a little bit thicker, of course, because it has that manlet in front of it. So, you know, there is going to be some difference with tanks, and it's going to mean that some weak spots aren't there anymore. Now, one of the big nations it's going to affect as well is Russia, of course. Germany and Russia are probably the most effective nations, but also, of course, America, things like that. There are a variety of vehicles that are going to be affected by this change. It's, to me, a good change, and it's going to help out a lot. It's going to make the game more interesting. I do think they need to do something about air spawns as well, but that's for another story. But this is something that's going in the right direction, and that's something that I like to see, and I'm happy to see as well, because for so long we've had things not going in the right direction, and now we might actually be getting something that improves the gameplay. Now, one of the other things they've said they're going to work on is the way the shells work. And for armor-piercing ballistic cap, for instance, use my water bottle as a good example because it's a bit shell-like. So now APC APCR is also going to be affected by this, and it's going to be quite heavily affected by the looks of things, but we're just going to talk about the ballistic cap for the moment. So when an armor-piercing ballistic cap hits, it hits, but it also penetrates. Once it starts to penetrate, there's a fuse that gets ignited, well, started, and then once it gets in the tank, it goes boom. However, what you have to remember, inside of there is the explosive ammunition, and it's not a solid shell. An armor-piercing ballistic cap is not a solid shell. It's got the explosive filler in there. So what happens is it's lighter, and it's also structurally not as strong. So you get a bit of flattening, things like that. It loses penetration value. Armor-piercing ballistic cap, armor-piercing HE is not as strong as a pure AP shell. And a pure AP shell is going to really outperform one of those armor-piercing ballistic cap shells. Now, Gijam said they want to be more historically accurate, things like that, and that's brilliant. So hopefully this means that we're going to get a better system, we're going to get correct penetration figures, but also we're going to get correct penetration when we're shooting at things, because currently some of the shells are really quite wonky. You know, things like Hesh at the moment is really wonky, and that's something that may be fixed with this update. You know, Hesh may be something that's going to get fixed with this update, and something that may actually improve, which would be fantastic, because although Hesh is quite powerful, it still has its problems. And with the changes that they've said they're looking at making, I think we're going to be looking at some really big changes for things like Hesh. As I said, arm piercing is going to be a lot stronger by the looks of things, which is going to be very interesting to see. So the IS-4 up there, for instance, let's just lob a Hesh shell at it. So right there, of course, we don't penetrate with the Hesh shell, but what should happen with Hesh basically is it should basically cover that whole area with it sort of goes there and then goes splat, covers the whole area with plastic explosives, and then goes boom. Now, the thickness of the armor, it doesn't really matter how thick the armor is, because it's still going to get damaged. And what happens with Hesh is it basically hits there, doesn't penetrate, but on the inside it makes everything bounce and bits break off and things fall apart. So it's designed to not really, you know, it's not designed to penetrate, you know, it's not there to penetrate, and it's not there to make a big explosion. Well, it is there to make a big explosion, but it's not there to like make a massive sort of explosion. So just there we see we actually got the kill with the Hesh, and Hesh should really cause a lot more damage than it is at the moment. The arm piercing fin stabilized, for instance, as well, heat fin stabilized as well, is not really acting quite as well as it should do. Well, not quite as correctly as it should do, because again, with this shell, it's basically, you know, heat FS is heat shell, so it is it's got that sort of heat element to it where it, you know, punctures and then squashes, and then there's copper and it goes melty and it melts through the tank like a heat round basically. But it also penetrates the vehicle and has that a little bit of explosive filler as well, and it sort of sort of overperforms a bit at the moment, and there's a lot of shells that are overperforming basically, so it makes a lot of tanks look a lot weaker than they actually are. You know, Tigers and things like that, they had a hell of a time penetrating those bastards, you know, and with the new changes, things like the Jumbo and things like that are going to get affected a little bit negatively. So things like the Jumbo, for instance, with the calculations, with the M61 shot, it's going to lose around about 10mm of penetration, 10-20mm of penetration. It's going to be much less effective, which it was. You know, the M3 cannon and the standard APHE shot, or AP ballistic cap shot, was not super effective against German armour. They really did struggle with it, and that's why they needed AP, and that's where they needed the sort of the 76s and stuff like that, with the armour piercing shot, which was a lot stronger than the APCBC round. You know, so it could be a really big boon to things like the British tanks and the French tanks as well, having that armor-piercing shell. It's going to be interesting, basically, yeah. So we'll see how it goes. We'll still wait for news, we'll wait for more information. I imagine this is going to be something that's going to happen in the next big patch. But for now, just go to the dev blog and visit that, because you're going to find it very useful. And you're going to find the most information on it as well with that. So I recommend heading there, having a read of everything. It's a very interesting read. The chart's very interesting. It's going to really change up things for tanks. Another thing as well, just while we're looking at it, it's going to change things for ships as well. You know, because again they use similar shells, and this is going to help with naval combat too. It's going to affect negatively things like the KV-2, if it's actually what they say it's going to be. Things like the KV-2 are really going to struggle, because they're going to lose about 10-15 millimeters of penetration, which is a huge deal, because, you know, you've only got about 90, I think it's like 125 millimeters of penetration with the standard shell, the G530. Now, with the heavier shell, it's going to be a bit more effective, because the way this basically works is it's mass plus velocity. Velocity plus mass equals blah blah blah. It's, you know, mathematical scientific stuff that I am not extremely well versed on. I do understand it, but it's very, very complicated. Wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff almost. But basically, you know, the faster a big heavy object goes, the more damage it's going to do. Obviously, the faster a small light object goes, it's going to do quite a lot of damage. However, a small light object hitting something that's very hard is not going to have any real impact to it. Whereas a big heavy object hitting something quite thick is going to have more impact to it. And hopefully this is what they mean by the changes. Hopefully this is what's going to happen. Hopefully it's going to mean things like the KV-2 no longer has as much penetration, because the velocity of the gun was very slow, which meant these big heavy shells were travelling relatively slow. Of course, that's about 500 meters per second, which is still quite fast, but it will struggle against a bit more armour, because it's a bit more and then doesn't go through. And it generally, it would cause fatigue and cracks in armour and things like that, rather than completely penetrate it. But it would be enough to make you go, oh shit, I'm getting out of here. Anyway, I'm going to end there before I keep waffling on about things. I'm extremely tired, so I do apologise about this video. It was just a quick video. I'm actually very busy at the moment. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a like, comment, subscribe, blah blah blah. Down below in the comment, in the description, there is a link to my Discord channel. If you would like to join my Discord, come join the Kaiju layer and have some fun. There's some nice people around there, and we just generally chat and things like that. But yeah, feel free to join, feel free to come and say hello, come hassle me about this kind of stuff. I'm more than happy to try and help you out and explain things if need be, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.